You YouTube people, good morning, and welcome to the highlight of civilization itself. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams. There's never been a finer moment. It's why everybody's talking about it. Probably everywhere you go, do you hear people, blah, 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 Coffee with Scott Adams? Yeah, it's like that everywhere. And if you would like to enjoy this experience in a way that nobody ever has enjoyed it, well, all you need is a cup or mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, the thing makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip. And it happens now. Go. Sip, sip, saray. Yeah, no, sip, sip, saray. No, that doesn't work. All right, well, the news is funny and unimportant today. Mostly funny and unimportant, and that's the best kind. The best kind of news is the stuff you can be entertained by and not worry about too much. So, number one, in the news that isn't very important at all, but it's funny, White House spokesperson Jean-Pierre, she said, quote, "The president is the best communicator that we have in the White House." I will pause while you enjoy the deep, hearty laugh that you're having at home. And as you might imagine, the wags, the critics, the people who just can't handle a happy thought, they weighed in and they said things like, well, that explains a lot. Oh, you're reminding me of the cruelest thing that a teacher ever said to a child. It happened in a science class, my science class. I was in it when I was, 14 or 15 or something. And I'm in a science class, and our science teacher was a very well-known badass in the town. So he was a teacher, but he was a badass. And one day he was telling us that, you can't look at the sun because it would, burn your retinas or something. And there was a kid in the first row who raised his hand, and you'd have to know that the kid in the first row, he had been promoted since kindergarten without passing any classes. Now, that was how they did it in the old days. I think he'd passed 0 classes, but he'd already gotten into high school. So they didn't really have like a special class for the people who couldn't pass any class. He had, serious learning disability problems. And so this kid who was famous as being the one kid who probably had literally never passed a class, he's sitting there and the professor says, you can't look at the sun, don't look at the sun. And the kid in the front row raises his hand and he goes, I look at the sun all the time. And the professor looks at him, not professor, but the science teacher. The science teacher looks at him, and in front of the entire class, he goes, well, that explains a lot. That actually happened. If you could imagine that the rest of us were crying because it was so cruel and funny at the same time. It was really cruel, but it was very funny. True story. So, yes, the Biden is the best communicator in the White House, and maybe that does explain a lot. Maybe it does. Well, Wall Street Journal is reporting that speed dating is making a comeback. If you don't know what that is, it's where a bunch of single people get together and they quickly spend like a minute with each other. I don't know how fast the speed is, but it's really fast. So something like a minute or two you spend with each person. You sit down and you say, how you doing, for about a minute. It's about 5 minutes, somebody says. A few minutes, I guess. And you use the power of first impressions, basically. Because first impressions are weirdly reliable in terms of attraction. So here's my prediction. I don't think that online dating can be a viable long-term solution. And, it's been well discussed, that the most attractive guys get 100% of the female interest, and that leaves everybody, scrambling for the scraps, I guess. But on top of that, is there anybody here who uses online dating? Is this even like a category that anybody watching this cares about? All right, some of you? All right. I want to see if I can get a confirmation of this. Everybody's lying, right? Or are the men not lying about their height and their income and showing old pictures? And are the women not lying about their appearance and taking the one photograph that makes them look like a different person, or using the photograph from 15 years ago? And so I wouldn't believe anything I saw on an online dating profile. So the whole point of online dating is that you get more and better information about alternatives, and you can contact them, right? The whole point is more and better information about your alternatives and the ability to contact them. But once you remove any honesty, there's no information. All it is you contacting a random person who may or may not have something in common with that online profile. So it's basically just turned into the phone book. Online dating is just the phone book from the 70s. If you had a phone book in the 70s, you could flip through and randomly dial a number and ask for somebody for a date. The problem with that is you would have no idea who you were calling. Just like online dating in 2023. Just because the profile says they're a certain thing, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have any informational value whatsoever. You have no idea who you're getting. It's just a phone book. So I'm not surprised that in-person dating would have a comeback. I feel like that has to happen. Because people don't give up on mating. Young people aren't going to say, well, online dating doesn't work, so we just won't do it anymore. I think it has to move back to in-person. Wouldn't you say? What do you think? Is it not inevitable that all the online stuff is broken, so it'll become less important? We'll see. Well, there's a Harvard study, or study of Harvard people, I guess. They've been studying 268 Harvard sophomores. They started studying them in 1938. They're trying to find out various things about their lifestyle and health and happiness. And they basically just tracked this little group. What they believe they found, and I believe that they, of course, did not find it, but what they believe they found is that the people who had the best social lives were the happiest by the time they reached 80. The people with the best social experiences, the best satisfying social lives, were the happiest at age 80. What's wrong with that study? It's the whole correlation causation problem every time. Because I have a feeling that the people who are able to have satisfying social lives are probably different kinds of people. Does somebody who weighs 400 pounds have the same access to a happy social life as someone who doesn't? What do you think? If you weighed 400 pounds, would your social life just be raging? I don't think so. If you had, some serious health problem, would your dating life be as good as if you didn't? I mean, to me, it looks like healthy people are happier. That's all it is. And are you surprised that healthier people are happier? That feels like you haven't learned anything. I mean, there's nothing in the information that's telling you anything. So I feel like this study, first of all, it's not that many people. Secondly, they came from Harvard, so that's a weird sample. But to me, it's obvious that good relationships make people happier. There, no question about that. But I don't think the 400-pound person can say, oh, I know how to be happy now. I'll just go have good relationships. No, there's something about the 400-pounder that they need to change before the good relationships are going to be coming in quantity. So I think it's basically just a health impact that they confuse with causation again. Well, Alex Berenson is catching up to me. Finally. So he's got a pretty provocative and interesting piece in Substack, and he allowed everybody to see this one, so it's not behind the paywall, and I recommend it. It looks like it's well written and interesting. And he starts out by saying that the regular seasonal flu shots are closer to a placebo than an actual useful thing. Who told you that first? Who's the first person who told you that the regular annual flu shot was bullshit? Well, I've been saying it. I've been saying it since the beginning of the pandemic. Because I never believed that people were dying from regular flu, at least in 50,000 a year. You know, whoever believed that 30,000 people a year were dying from the regular flu, and that therefore you needed to get a shot so maybe you wouldn't die. I never believed that. To me, that just always looked like obviously bullshit. So I have not taken the regular annual flu shot for some years. I don't know how many. All right, so it's good to see that Alex Berenson has caught up to me on the regular flu shots being completely useless. But in his article, he had this statement that I thought perfectly captures my point of view. So this is from Alex Berenson, one of the most famous skeptics of the COVID shots. And he says in his piece today, quote, "We now have 2 years of real-world data on the mRNA shots, based on billions of doses. Putting side effects aside," so he and I both accept that the mRNA stuff would have higher side effects than traditional things. So he and I have always been on the same side that the new technology is riskier. All right, so we always agreed on that. And he says, putting aside the side effects that he and I agree on, they work extremely well against COVID for about 4 months after the second shot. So the vaccinations only work but well for about 4 months. So by complete luck, I got my second dose right before the Delta phase, which turned out to be the perfect time to do it. Because if Alex Berenson is right, that it was very protective, but only for about 4 months, I hit the 4 months perfectly. The 4 months that I was most protected was during Delta. Now I didn't plan that, but I had the best accidental timing. Now, you would argue that it would be better not to have any of it in you at this point, and I agree. Do we agree on that? As of today, if you didn't get any Delta or Alpha, you're way better off if you just didn't get vaccinated, I think. Below a certain age for sure. So I think Alex and I are on exactly the same page on all of this stuff. I would agree with him completely that getting vaccinated for Omicron would be a sketchy situation. I'm not sure why I would. I would agree with him, and always have, that I didn't understand why young people were getting vaccinated. But apparently for older people and people who have comorbidities and people who got the shot at exactly the right time, it might have been a good insurance policy. And I did some research to see if the current thinking is if the vaccinations, so-called, not really vaccinations, but if the shots actually had protective effect against long COVID, and the current thinking is yes. Not complete protection, but it would reduce it. So it looks like I hit it exactly, by luck. All right, let's talk about retail sales. Jumped 3%, the news is crowing. What would cause retail sales to go up 3% in January? Is there any macro, large economic influence that's been happening lately called inflation? Inflation, I believe is the word. Yeah. Can you believe that the news reported 3% higher retail sales without mentioning that that's sort of the rate of inflation? At least for a lot of items. It depends on the item. But, okay. All right. And this caused me to ask the following question. What happened to that supply chain emergency? Are docks still have ships like waiting for days? Did that just stop? How did the news just sort of peter down, right? What happened? Why is the news never reported about all those ships that used to be waiting to be unloaded but weren't unloaded? How in the world does a story that big just disappear? Do you have, I mean, seriously, I don't know how that could happen. Like, what is happening? There's something terrible happening that this could even be Florida took up the slack. But there must have been something that happened. What was it that we slowly adjusted and moved back to normal, as I see the comment there? Or was it that we did something clever and that made a difference? Or was it never real? I have no idea. Isn't that weird? Did you even notice that, in my opinion, that was the biggest story in the world? Because the supply chain problem could have crashed a lot of stuff, and might still. So I asked people, and so I tweeted that. And a number of people said, no, we still have big problems getting stuff. It takes a long time. And a lot of the stuff they're getting seems to be important for, the infrastructure and the power grid and all that stuff. Now, I've also noticed that if I'm buying something, sometimes it takes longer to get here. But it hasn't been a big deal in my life. Yeah, I haven't really noticed any big deal. And I've bought, a reasonable number of things recently. They all seem to come. Maybe it's just I got used to waiting for 2 months. Because there's a lot of stuff that I buy now that I wait 2 months for. And that no longer seems like a long time to me. Specific firearms are 6 to 8 months. I can see that. But it was always the case. It was always the case that some things took months, even in the best of times. If you buy a high-end car, and let's say a BMW with certain features, you're going to wait months for that because they have to build it for you and ship it over here. You've been waiting a month and a half for some bowling shirts from China. Yeah. I did have one, small item that took a few months, but I feel as if maybe just we all got used to it and it was never going to kill us. I don't know. The FDA is considering whether to make Narcan easier to purchase. And I guess if they do this, you won't need a prescription. You can just buy it from Amazon or anywhere else, I guess. Now, I love this. I think this is the right thing to do. But I can't not notice that the only time we do something that looks right is if a pharmaceutical company can make more money. Why is that always the case? Oh, there's only one thing you can do about fentanyl. There's only one thing. Just one thing you can do. Coincidentally, it requires giving a lot more money to a pharmaceutical company that makes the Narcan. Why is that? Is that a coincidence? It doesn't feel like a coincidence, does it? It feels like unless somebody who is a big corporate entity can make money, the government won't do a damn thing. It's just like, oh, this drug company can make money. Let's do this. Now, I'm in favor of it, so I don't want to poo-poo it. We should all have Narcan handy, and it does work. It does work. Well, the EU is effectively banning gas cars by 2035. So the emission requirements have been lowered to the point where no gas car could ever meet the requirement. So 2035. You think that's too far away, too soon? So I think it's all going to be electric cars or something. Now, of course, they could always revise that in 5 years if it looks like it's not going to happen. But I don't know. I guess my biggest concern would be that they wouldn't have enough electricity. I don't hate the fact that we're moving probably to electric. Yeah. Oh, they can vote on whatever they want, but it has to pass inside each. Oh, okay. I'm seeing a clarification that I was not aware of. That if the EU votes for it, it doesn't mean anything unless the individual countries say yes. That makes sense. Is that right? The individual countries still have to say yes? Or what happens if most of them say yes and some say no? They still get to do their own thing? Or does the EU have some kind of control over individual nations? I don't know the answer to that question. All right. Well, anyway, that's developing. Let's talk about that Ohio explosion. How many of you believe that there are dead fish and dead birds all over the place in Palestine, Ohio, and that that's caused by the chemical leak? Yeah, I've seen news reports both ways. I've seen news reports that they were coincidentally dead fish and probably wasn't caused by that. I would say I don't believe those stories. I'm not saying they're false, but they don't feel believable to me. Could be. Yeah, it's a distinct possibility, but it doesn't feel. And here's the part I'm trying to understand. Why would anybody in the government, any government, local or any other, why would any government official want people to go back to their homes prematurely? Because remember, government officials, they're not the ones suffering. Yeah, they're the ones who give you mandates. I feel like the government would be very conservative because there's nothing for them to gain to go back early. But there's plenty to lose if people go back early and they have diseases from it. So I feel like the information coming out of that area is all bad. It's hard to form a clear opinion on this because I just think everybody's lying about everything. So I guess that's my bottom line. Everybody's lying about everything. Well, the government says they still don't know what those 3 unidentified objects were that they shot down as of this morning. Do you believe that? Do you believe that our government does not know what those 3 objects are that they shot down? No, those are lies. Yeah, they're definitely lies. Yeah. Do you believe that we got to today and nobody in the major media, neither left nor right media, nobody in the major media has either mocked me for saying that here's a picture of the weather balloon with the octagonal bottom. It's clearly that's what they shot down, at least one of them, because they said it was octagonal. Nobody has either debunked me or agreed with me. They've just ignored it. What did I predict? I predicted it would be ignored. Didn't I? And it's almost impossible to imagine that could be ignored. Because, like I said, my Twitter feed hits every major news entity. There's at least a producer for every news entity that follows me on Twitter. They've all seen me show the picture. It's an American company. They can verify it by just going to the website like I did. It's right on the front page. It's on the front page of their website. Big picture of an octagonal payload on a balloon. Now, if you report that there's a UFO with an octagonal shape that's exactly like what that balloon has, and you ignore the fact that a cartoonist found a picture of it on a website from the company that makes lots of them, and by the way, there should be a fair number of those octagonal things above our skies right now, because it's a weather balloon company and they're doing well. They make a lot of weather balloons. People buy them. They're in the air. They're above you. They're octagonal. Now, how in the world could that be ignored by the entire media? At the very least, somebody should be debunking me. Am I right? Somebody should say, ha ha, cartoonist, you couldn't possibly be right. Here's why. That company went out of business 10 years ago. Their website's still up. Something. That's not the case. But something. Just anything. Because when was the last time I put anything on Twitter that wasn't debunked? Anything. No matter how right or wrong you are, when you put something on Twitter, somebody tries to debunk it. But I put this on here and it just sort of, people go, nobody knows what to do with it. Mike says, you were wrong about vax. Mike doesn't know who I am. Mike, I'm Scott Adams. I'm a cartoonist. You should learn something about me, because obviously you don't know anything about me. Yes, I did do a husband apology where I apologized for not knowing what I had done wrong. And people were nice enough to accept my apology, and I appreciated that. All right. But, Mike, did you think that I told other people what to do with the so-called vaccination? I'm just curious. Is there somebody on YouTube who believes I recommended somebody else get medical treatments? Do you actually believe that? Do you actually believe that I recommended medical treatments for people? I'm pretty sure I only recommended my own situation. Pretty sure. And why would you fact check my personal medical decisions? Why would you do that? Mike, why would you do that? All right. I'll let you go. Nikki Haley has decided to be boring. Here's her, they're talking about what her approach will be or what her slogan will be. And she's working with not enough Americans feel proud of their country, and it's time for a new generation of leadership. And in her announcement speech, she will, quote, lean into that idea that America is not racist, and we should be proud of who we are as Americans. And generations are being taught to hate America, and we need to renew our American pride and stop. I'm sorry. What was I doing? Oh, I was reading something about Nikki Haley's political positioning. I'm bored to death by that. No, I like it. I like it. The things that I just said, I agree with and I like. But I'm not really inspired by it. I mean, it doesn't come close to Make America Great Again, as provocative as that is in good and both bad ways. It's just not, I don't know, it's just a nothing. Like what exactly is Nikki Haley going to be doing about any of that? That's something a president can complain about, but presidents don't have any control over the school boards, and the school boards decide what the schools teach, or the teachers' unions, let's say. Teachers' unions decide what gets taught, directly or indirectly. And then the children get brainwashed to, feel bad about racism and themselves and everything else. What is Nikki Haley going to do about any of that? It's a state problem. So like she's running for president like she's running for governor. Like none of it, it's just like a little bit off. Am I wrong? And again, I agree with her that America, we should learn to think of ourselves as a non-racist country as best we can while we're still working on, making it that. I mean, I think it makes sense to be aspirationally non-racist. But what is she going to do about it? What did anybody ever do about it? It's just not something that the president works on. So if Nikki Haley can't even come up with a major theme that's something a president even works on, I mean, what's she going to do about wars and inflation and borders and stuff like that? Those are interesting. But the other stuff feels just like talk. All right, Rasmussen has a new poll that is frightening for two different reasons. I'll tell you what the poll says, and then I'll tell you the two reasons it's frightening. One of them may be obvious. That in a head-to-head matchup between Biden and Trump, Biden would win. Okay, that's the first scary thing. And to be as objective as possible, not because he's a Democrat, that's not why I'm saying that's bad. You know, some would say that, but that's not my point. My point is he's 100 years old. That's all. You know, if he were a Republican, I'd say the same thing. Too old. But apparently he would win against Trump, according to the Rasmussen poll. Now, here's the second bad news. The second bad news is this might indicate there's something wrong with polling. And apparently there are challenges at the moment that are different than challenges in the past. You know, in the old days, you'd just call it everybody's landline, and you'd get something that was semi-useful. But now young people don't answer landlines, so you have to get them through some kind of other mechanism in which there's payment. So there's a payment involved. And there's some thought that maybe the young people are, you know, just checking boxes to get a payment, and maybe they're not getting the right actual opinions. So there's some hypotheses within the polling community. There are some hypotheses that the polling has some kind of distortion in it that they're looking for as hard as they can. So I don't think you need to believe a poll at the moment on presidential stuff. But let's hope that that gets more credible as we go. All right. But they're still close. I mean, it's a close thing. However, the poll said that Trump would beat Kamala Harris if they ran against each other. You know, do personalities matter anymore? Or is it really just the process itself? Like the Democrats vote for the Democrats, the Republicans vote for the Republicans, and whoever gets out more votes and games the system the best wins. It no longer feels like it's anything about the candidates. Because when I play the game in my head where I change out the Republican candidates and say, okay, what if it's DeSantis? What if it's Pence? What if it's Mike Pompeo? And then I say to myself the same thing after I'm done. I don't think it matters. Do you? Do you think that Pompeo and DeSantis would have a different result? I feel like it would be identical. Trump is the only one that's like a wild card, because people like really will be, you know, motivated. People will be motivated to vote for him and against him, etc. But the others are not really motivating. If you had a non-motivating Republican, wouldn't the Democrats win? I don't know that. But I don't think there are enough Republicans to just win straight up if you had a generic Republican against a generic Democrat. Don't Democrats win every time? Am I wrong about that? Because there are just more of them, right? And more of them in the places where it matters. Trump was losing in the polls in 2016. Well, he was very close by Election Day. I think by Election Day, the polls were very close. And in fact, the result was very close. Trump took the place of abortion. Okay? This is what it looks like when Scott says, I'm not supporting Trump. Well, I am supporting Trump because I'm a single issue voter this time. This time it's just going to be fentanyl for me. I mean, I'll talk about all the issues, but my own personal choice is just who's toughest on fentanyl. And if somebody else decides to be as tough as Trump, but they're younger, I'd probably jump to that person. It's because I'm telling you, I have no loyalty this time. I'm operating on zero loyalty, one topic, and I don't recommend that. I don't recommend it for the rest of you. I'm just saying my personal choice. All right, I like Trump personally. For what that's worth. All right, have you seen my campaign for California Senate is going well? So far, the only activity is Machiavellis Underbelly, the Twitter account that you should all be following, which is running sort of a campaign for me with deep fakes. So there's a fake version of me that AI creates that gives speeches that I tweet when I see them. And now there's a Adam Schiff AI that gives a little talk as a goblin. So it's Adam Schiff represented as a goblin. And so that's how my campaign is going. Now, what's happening with Machiavelli's Underbelly and these AI ad campaigns? They're not, obviously they're not super serious in terms of my running for Senate, but it's telling you a lot about what's coming. You should take a look at them. Because you could easily imagine a world in which the version of Adam Schiff as a goblin becomes viral and you can't get it out of your head. Now, I don't know that this one will become viral. So far these tweets have stayed within a smallish community. But it would only take one of them to break out. And the AI is so powerful and so visual that it could completely rebrand a candidate. Yeah, it could totally rebrand the candidate. Now, the reason that the goblin one won't work is that the goblin that the AI created was kind of cute. Cute in a goblin way. Whereas Adam Schiff is sort of not. Like the actual Adam Schiff looks more like a creature than what AI created as the comical creature that was supposed to be him. The real one is super creepy. The artificial one was kind of cute. So it worked opposite of how the power of AI could work, which is making the artificial one creepy. You know the uncanny valley, I talk about it too much. It's the effect where if a robot looks like a proper robot, it could be cute. Oh, that's a cute little robot. But if you made an android that looked almost like a human, but not quite, it would be a frightening zombie look. Because it's like almost a person, but why does it talk like this? And its eyes are too open. Right? You would be disgusted by it because it's almost human, but there's something wrong. It just makes you creep out. Imagine AI taking a real politician's speech and only adding the uncanny valley, just like a 3% tweak. So it is the person, and when you look at it, you're like, I feel like this is the actual person talking, because it would be. They would just be tweaked a little bit to make them look like the uncanny valley. And you would be disgusted by them at a subconscious level, but it would look just like that person, kind of, minus 2 or 3%. So you can see the power of the tool. In this particular example, it made him look cute, so it worked opposite. But you could, once you refine this tool a little bit and you get that uncanny valley thing going, it's just going to look just like the real one, minus 2 or 3%, and I don't know if you can tell. We saw a preview of this when some Democrats had their voices slowed down. I think it was Nancy Pelosi. If you slowed down her voice by just a few percent, she sounded drunk. And also when you played it at full speed, she sounded drunk. But she sounded drunker if you slowed it down. You remember that, right? So that's the sort of small change you could make to a real thing that people would not pick up. They would not pick that up. They would just feel something, and they wouldn't know why. That's how dangerous it is. Now, keep in mind that no hypnotist has used AI as far as I know. If you put that tool in my hands, you got problems, right? So it's a good thing I'm not directly working with it. So an interesting tweet. I'm going to assume it's true. I don't know. It's the type of thing that's a little bit too on the nose. So maybe it's not true. But I'm going to trust it. In this case, I'm going to trust it. Because I want to, I guess. But this is a tweet I saw the other day. It said, Dear Disney, we are a black family, And at our daughter's request, we are canceling Disney Plus over, there's a movie called The Proud Family, and I guess it's a black family. And the tweet goes on and says, she feels, meaning the daughter, she feels it promotes racism against whites. After looking at it, I have to agree with her, and I am so proud of her. Now, what happens when the common enemy is wokeness? Because it is the common enemy. and Americans need a common enemy. Like, we don't do well when we don't have an external enemy, right? And Russia isn't working for us. Like, we're all, oh, yeah, Ukraine. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's uniting the country in any way, would you? It's not, Ukraine does not unite the country. It's just a common, or Russia's sort of a common adversary, I guess. So, and even people don't agree whether Russia is the bad guy or Ukraine. So it's not really unifying us. But here's my optimistic take. A child born today, literally today, do you think that they will grow up embracing wokeness or rejecting it because every new generation rejects the thing that their parents did? Right? If you're born today, your parents are woke, right? If your parents are woke, are you going to be? Probably not. I feel like the next generation is going to erase wokeness. And I'm going to go further. And I'll bet, I don't know this. Somebody may have made this prediction before. I'm going to make you the weirdest out-of-the-box prediction. The kids being born today are the next boomers. Not in terms of numbers, probably. The kids born today are the next boomers. They're going to be their grandparents and great-grandparents. Yeah. The boomers were pro-America and anti-victim, right? I mean, they were more than that, but they were very pro-America and they were very anti-victim. They were not woke at all. The people born today are going to be pro-America because it's the opposite of what's happening right now. And they're going to be anti-woke because it's the opposite of what's happening now. And it has, the prediction is based entirely on that the new generation corrects what the old generation did in excess, right? Now, I might surprise you if you haven't heard me say this. I'm in favor of wokeness. I'm totally in favor of it. I like wokeness. Let me say it clearly. I like wokeness. What I don't like is overdoing it. I like drinking water. If I had to drink a barrel of water a day, I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't like it at all. Right? I like eating potato chips. If I had to eat 100 pounds of potato chips a day, I wouldn't like it. Wouldn't like it at all. That doesn't make potato chips not taste good. They're still good. I just don't want too much of it. Here's the right amount. Everybody has their personal level. Here's the right amount of wokeness for me. Somebody prefers to be called by some name than another name. It doesn't matter what it is. So you could say, I prefer to be called black instead of African American. Okay. I don't have any problem with that. Is it inconvenient for me? A little bit. But that's also how society works, right? We all accept a little bit of inconvenience. Like, I will hold the door for you, even though it's a little inconvenient. It's just not very inconvenient. I'd rather hold the door for you because society is just a better way to grease society, even though it's a little bit inconvenient. So wokeness to me is like that. There's a little bit of good wokeness. It's a little bit inconvenient, but I like it. Because I just like being, I would like people to call me by what I would like to be called. So if somebody has the same request to me, I say, well, shoe on the other foot, I would certainly want to be called what I consider respectful. So I would ask the same thing. So if somebody asks me that, I'm good. Now, with the pronouns, specifically, I'm anti-pronoun, but I'm pro calling people what they want to be called. I just ask that you don't give me a problem when I say it wrong. That's all. Right? Maybe clarify for me if I say it wrong. Oh, I prefer her or him. Okay. I have no problem with that. But you don't have a problem with me if I get it wrong. That's my bottom line. If I get it wrong, don't give me any problems. Not cool, because I'm trying, right? My head's in the right place. I'm trying to give people whatever respect they think is appropriate within reason. Within reason. And if those of you who reject it, fine. Yeah, if those of you who say, no way, I like it the old way, I'm okay with you too. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. All right. But I think there's something good coming from the coming generation. Twitter algorithms are so complicated that Elon Musk got apparently concerned because his own tweets apparently sometimes would go, to tens of millions of people and sometimes to a much smaller number. And he couldn't figure out why. And his engineers speculated that maybe it was because some of his tweets were not as popular, or that people were kind of over him. He wasn't as interesting anymore. Musk, quite correctly, as it turns out, believed that was BS, and that there's something in the algorithm that nobody understands. And so he brought together his remaining engineers that he has not yet fired, and this is how it's reported anyway. We don't know what's true, we only know what's reported. But what's reported is that he brought them together and they could not figure out why his tweets get the amount of attention or lack of attention that they do. Now think about that. The primary engineers at Twitter could not figure out how the algorithm works for Elon Musk. In other words, they could not predict in advance that if you put this through the algorithm, it should have a predictable outcome. It appears unpredictable, and it appears too complicated to fix. Do you know how they fixed it? They put in some code that forced Elon Musk's tweets to be seen by more people. They had to bypass their own algorithm because they didn't understand how it works or how to correct it. That's what I predicted. That's what I predicted. I predicted it was too complicated and there was no one person at Twitter who had an idea how the algorithm works. Does anybody remember me saying that long before Musk took over? Does anybody remember me saying that? Yeah, okay. So some people remember. Yeah, so it turns out it's exactly that. It's too complicated for any engineer at Twitter to actually know if the system has been gamed. That was the only thing that made sense to me from the start, is that the engineers didn't know themselves. They didn't know. Now, if it's possible to put in this one line of code that bumps Elon's tweets higher up, I think they've adjusted it since then, so that may not be the case now. But wouldn't that mean that any engineer who had access could have forced a line of code in there? I don't know if they catch every line of code or how that works. But could somebody have inserted some code without the double checking process catching it? Is that something that could have happened? Or is any change in the code, does it get flagged to somebody in charge so they can see the actual lines that have been added? I would assume it gets flagged. Like, I can't imagine you could change the code on the fly. Like, there would have to be a process for, new patches going in and who looks at it and all that. But we were surprised, or maybe we weren't, that so many engineers had access to the code or the algorithm. Maybe that's different. So I guess we still don't know what's going on there, and Elon Musk doesn't. But here's the good news and the bad news. If we can't understand how the algorithm at Twitter works, it's alive. It's alive. No, it really is. It's alive. We could kill it. But do you know what makes people appear alive? What makes anything appear alive is that you can't predict what it's going to do. That's it. You don't know why it does what it does. If human brains were predictable algorithms, where you knew if I say this to this person, they will respond this exact way. If you knew exactly how a person or an animal would respond, exactly, they would not appear alive. They wouldn't. They would appear to be machines because they would be machines. It's only the complexity and the unpredictability of our actions that make us appear alive. Twitter is unpredictable. And apparently it exists as an entity. Does it reproduce? Apparently. It reproduces in the sense that it grows, and it gets new users, and it gets new engagement. And all of those things are like the system that, that form the algorithm and its supporting body, you could say. You could say the users and all the activity outside of the algorithm are like the body of a person. By analogy, again, this is not an argument, just an explanation. Analogies don't work for arguments, only explanations. If you imagine a person as a brain, but then also a body, and if you don't take care of the body, the brain can't survive. So Twitter is the algorithm, is like the brain. It's unpredictable. But the body, the company, exists like the body of a human. And so as long as Twitter, the entity, exists, and its brain is this algorithm, it's alive. I'm watching some people having a reaction that's not so good. Yeah. The one thing that we cling to more than anything as human beings is that we have a soul and we're special. We're not like machines. We're probably very close as a civilization to learning that's wrong. And that the only difference between the Twitter algorithm and you is how you feel. Yeah, that's about it. But they're both alive. For all practical purposes. Free will is an illusion, just as it is with the Twitter algorithm. But if humans and Twitter algorithms are unpredictable, they're both alive. Yeah, that's a thinker, isn't it? Here's an update on Ukraine that's actually something I hadn't heard before. Something interesting for a change. Now, before all of my Ukraine discussions, what do I tell you? I don't say this in tweets so much, but I probably should. I tell you that you shouldn't believe anything that you hear about Ukraine or Russia. No, I don't believe that Ukraine is all good and Russia is all bad. No, I don't believe that. I don't believe the reasons we got into the war. I don't believe we know who's going to win. I don't believe we know how it'll turn out. Don't believe any of it. But it's still fun to talk about. So General Petraeus, who knows more than I do, was asked by Peter Bergen, and this is on CNN site, what technologies have proven key to Ukrainian successes in this war? And this is interesting. So here are the top 4 things that General Petraeus, who actually knows what he's talking about, as opposed to me, this is what he says were the top technologies that are making a difference. Number 1, Elon Musk's satellite system. Elon Musk is one of the top 4 technologies that allow Ukraine to stay in the fight. Starlink. Elon Musk is, again, one of the most important people in the world because he built Starlink. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the HIMARS system, the highly precise rockets. And I think whoever has the most precise rockets wins. I mean, it's just... So it used to be in the old days that if you could see something, you could destroy it. But that wasn't as true as it is today, because the drones can see anything on the Russian side. They can spot anything worth destroying. And now we can put a missile right on it. So at this point, we can see and destroy anything they want. Not we, the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians can see with drones and then put a missile right on it as often as they want to, all day long, and probably not run out of missiles. I don't know how you lose. I'm not sure how you could lose in that situation, but I suppose the other side could have overwhelming, artillery and make a difference. All right, so the other technology is Clearview AI. Do you remember Clearview AI? It's an app that law enforcement uses to identify people. Now, not every law enforcement uses it because it's controversial. People complain that they, scraped data and there's a privacy problem and blah, blah, blah. But it works really well. It works really well. Just trust me, it works well. So apparently the Ukrainians are using it to tell who the Russians are so that they don't have any spies or people pretending to be Ukrainians. Do you know how valuable that is in a war between Ukrainians and Russians? An app where you can tell which side they're on by their face? Think about that. I mean, think about that. Imagine if they couldn't tell all the things that Russia could do to them if they could just slip their Russians in as Ukrainians and get behind the lines. But now they can just hold the phone up and they know if you're a Russian defector or a spy. That's kind of an amazing technology. Then the other thing is the Turkish armed drones that I guess the Ukrainians are using have been devastating to Russian targets. And then also the cheap commercial drones. So it looks like it's going to be a stalemate forever because the Ukrainians have better stuff and maybe better training, and they're more motivated. The Russians have the ability to throw unlimited, bodies into any situation. So it looks like it's just going to be a tie for a long time. Little one town going back and forth, but totally destroyed whenever it happens. Nobody wants to live there anymore. Yeah, so eventually I guess it has to be negotiated, but not until everybody's in enough pain. But that'll come. Ukrainians' manpower is decreasing, true, at the same time that their precision missiles are increasing. So if their precision missiles increase, they can lose a lot of people and still be okay. You just said whoever has the most precise rockets wins. Yeah, all things being equal. So if you had the same amount of people, the precise rockets would win. But if you had unlimited people that you're willing to kill, then that can be an equalizer. But yes, I was unclear about that. Don't you think Sean Penn hopes he gets assassinated so he can die like a dictator martyr? I wonder about that sometimes. Carpet bombing, yeah, that would work. Russian mothers will decide the war. Well, apparently the Russian public is completely uninterested. You know what would make a Russian citizen uninterested in the war? Telling them that only the dangerous prisoners are fighting. Oh, don't worry about it. We're just sending you prisoners. I think if this country fought a war and you believed incorrectly, but if you believed that the fighters were mostly prisoners from, who had done serious crimes, you probably wouldn't even care. Honestly, you probably wouldn't. You should, but I'll bet you wouldn't. All right. Is there any topic that I didn't talk about that's worth talking about? So I don't do the earthquakes and the shootings. I ignore those because you got plenty of that. You don't need to hear. All right. Does it feel like there's some big news coming? Do you feel like that? I feel like there's something coming. I guess there always is, so that's like a generic thing to say. But maybe even if there's nothing important coming, it will look like it's important. World War III? I would say the odds of nuclear war are vanishingly small. Because Putin doesn't need it. He doesn't need it. I think keeping Putin in office pretty much guarantees no nuclear war. Because I think he would settle for a stalemate. At the moment, Putin is not bothered by his domestic unhappiness. All right, so Putin has no domestic problem at home, right? He doesn't have a domestic problem. He's not running out of money, because apparently they can sell their energy to other places. So he has money, he has domestic support, and he has a strategy which will end up with him controlling, probably, some percentage of important strategic land that he can call a success. Why would he nuke us? There's no upside to that. He basically, his worst case scenario at this point looks like he stays in office, Russia stays stable, the domestic people are with him, and he gets a little extra land in, he gets to keep Crimea or something, whatever we negotiate. We, meaning the world and Ukraine. So no, we're not even close to nuclear war. We're probably further from nuclear war than, well, I won't say we're further. But now, as far as China, why in the world would China want to nuke us? You realize that would be insane, right? That would be like nuking themselves. I mean, they would end up getting nuked. But China still requires us to exist for them to exist. At the moment, China can't exist successfully without the United States also existing. Because right now they depend on our technology and our markets. If they nuke us, how are they better off? There's no scenario in which Russia or China could even conceivably imagine that launching a nuclear weapon would be in their best interest. Now, the thing that protects us is that although Xi and Putin are both evil bastards, nobody suggests that they're unstable minds, right? Everybody knows that they're working for the best interests of themselves and their countries, maybe the country second. But as long as they're stable, logical, smart, capable people, and they seem to be, how evil they are probably won't matter because they're still in it for their self-interest. And their self-interest has no connection to using a nuclear weapon. That could not possibly be a self-interest. Hitler was probably crazy from the start, and we're not suggesting that the leaders of Russia or China are crazy. You call the Ukrainian expedition logical? Yes. Yes. Because Russia will probably come out with some extra strategic goals. Putin will probably look good because of it, or he'll make sure that the history reports he looks good. Yeah, it looks like it worked. Because remember, Putin doesn't care too much about his casualties. So yeah, looks like it's working for him. I mean, it's not working as well as he wanted, but he's going to get some land, and he'll be able to sell that as a win. Iran and North Korea, same situation. So Kim Jong-un in North Korea has his own little, mafia kind of situation. Why would he want to ruin it? There's literally, and by the way, Kim Jong-un doesn't seem crazy to me. I don't see him, he's not acting crazy at all. So the good news is we don't seem to have any crazy leaders who have nukes. Iran is a special case, but they don't act that crazy. Even the Iranian, religious higher level considerations. It doesn't get you to that level of craziness. Biden, yeah, even Biden's not crazy enough to nuke. Here are the things I think you should not worry about. Number one, do not worry about getting nuked. We're not anywhere in that worry zone. Nowhere near it. Number two, don't worry that there's a ongoing war to destroy all our food sources and infrastructure. There are definitely a bunch of strange things happening in that domain, but there's nothing to tie them together to any particular foreign foe. And certainly our foreign foes are maybe trying to influence those things that are hurting us, just as we might be doing the same with them, but we're not aware of it. So that's sort of business as usual. We'll work that out. My take on all the things that are falling apart is that we're just at that point in the country's age where things start to crumble if you're not funding them and maintaining them. So some of it's just the normal life cycle of stuff. And some of it is that the news is surfacing stories to make it look like a pattern where maybe you didn't notice it before. Let me ask you this. If the only thing you knew about what's happening in the country was from the mainstream corporate news, would you believe that there's some kind of attack on the infrastructure? Because I think it takes social media to keep surfacing it so it looks like more of a pattern. You would say yes if you watch Fox News, but here's the trick. Fox News is influenced by social media, right? If social media were not making a big deal of the fact that it looks like some kind of coordinated attack, do you think Tucker Carlson would talk about it? I don't think so. I think only because social media sees it as a thing that the news says it's a thing, or it might be a thing, or people think it's a thing. But if you take away the social media, the corporate news would just talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. And you wouldn't even notice the pattern. You would just think, oh, a lot of things get attacked. And that'd be all. That's all you'd think about. The attacks look like insurance scams, maybe. Yeah. Ford battery China connection. I don't know the details of that story. Well, consider this. If there have really been 1,000 derailments in the past year, I think Tucker said that. Now, is that track? That feels like too high. And maybe derailment has all kinds of different levels. Maybe there's some kind of minor derailment where nobody gets hurt. 1,700 average per year. So if it's 1,700 per year, there must be a big category of minor derailments that you never hear about, right? Because it probably doesn't happen on the open lines. It probably happens like in the rail yard or something where things get switched around. I've got a feeling that that number is misleading while not necessarily being wrong. Oh, you think that they meant the number of cars derailed. Oh, but still it's too many. It feels still too many. So imagine if this Ohio train had not happened. So let's say the Ohio derailment never happened, the one with the chemical spill. If you had never heard of that one, you also never would have heard of the other 1,700. And you wouldn't even be aware there was any kind of pattern. So you were one train derailment away from not knowing that any train derailments happen. Do you know what I would have guessed per year? If you'd said, guess how many train derailments there are in the United States per year? I would have said, on average, 1. I would have guessed that there are several years in a row with none, sort of like plane accidents. I would have guessed like plane accidents. There could be years with none, and then, there'd be 1. And maybe in a weird case there'd be 2. But basically, I would have guessed 1. 1,700 doesn't sound slightly believable to me. But imagine that you never would have heard of them without that one, the Ohio one. Without Ohio, you would still think it's one, maybe three. Yeah, Hot Pocket, I agree with you. There are probably more technical derailments at the train yard where it's all slow and you can correct it more easily. Probably. That makes sense. Yeah. Derailment doesn't mean crash, correct. Derailment could mean they just immediately stop and then figure out how to fix it. You said derailments caused by shunts. You believe that there were 1,700 derailments caused by that trick where they put a wire across the rail somehow and they short out something? I don't know. If that were the case, that would be the biggest story in the country. Wouldn't it? Wouldn't we have a massive FBI department working on that? And how in the world can they not figure out who's doing that when we can figure out who does anything? How in the world are there not already trail cams on all the railroad sections? Hold on here. Let's see. A derailment can be caused by collision. Many derailments are minor. This is from Wikipedia. Yeah. So many derailments are minor. I guess that's what we knew. Of those, 400 is caused by, of 1,000 per year, according to the Federal Railroad Administration, of the thousands per year, 400 caused by track defects, another 500 or 600 by human error. Okay. Why are the residents of Palestine, Ohio not getting hotel rooms for free? I don't know. Maybe they don't have many. I can't imagine there's a whole lot of hotel business in that town. The chemicals were not to be on those tracks. Is that a story? Is there a story that those chemicals should not have been transported on those tracks? I don't know about that one. Oh, okay. All right, I'm going to run. I got to go. Goodbye, YouTube. I'll see you later. Best YouTube live stream you've seen today.